This week's episode of Wine Wars is sponsored by Winc. In our shipment of Winc this month, we've got a bottle of 2017 Cape Route Chenin Blanc. It looks like a handful of yellow diamonds have liquefied in my glass. The taste is just as rich, but it's not sweet at all, just fruity. I picked up notes of sweetgrass and kind of earthy undertones, like I was standing in an orchard of peach trees. Even though this is a 2017 Chenin Blanc, keep in mind that it's South African, which means that it was harvested 6 months earlier than what we're used to in the Northern Hemisphere. I would absolutely have this wine again, either as something that I brought to a dinner party, to a book club, to a birthday party, to a hanging out on the deck because it's summertime party. I would bring it to any occasion. It's so good. And as a bonus, it's vegan. If you'd like to try a bottle of Cape Route Chenin Blanc, visit trywinc.com/winewars for free shipping and $20 off your first shipment of wine. For more information about Winc, listen to episode 55 where we unbox our first shipment of Winc wines.
This week's episode of Wine Wars is also sponsored by Audible. If you don't have an Audible account by now, I don't know who you are or how you got here. What are you doing here? But hey, there's good news for you. If you go to audibletrial.com/Wine Wars, you get Audible for free for 30 days, and you get a free audiobook of your choice. And they have like 30 bajillion books to choose from. Works on any platform, whether you use an iPhone or an Android. Even MP3 players, they got you covered there. So again, go to audibletrial.com/Wine Wars for a free audiobook and 30-day free trial of Audible. Wine Wars is also now an affiliate of Amazon. If you go to our website, winewarspodcast.com, go to our sponsors page, you can click through the hyperlink to shop on Amazon, and then a small portion of your purchases help support the show. We will also have a hyperlink in our show notes if you look at your little device in your hand right now. Click on that, shop on Amazon, no increased cost to you, help support the show. Greatly appreciate it. Enjoy the show.
Previously on Wine Wars.
In our shipment of Winc this month, we've got a bottle of 2017 Cape Route
Charlie.
Chenin Blanc.
If you can't be cool, you're going to be out of the studio.
Wine Wars, the show with four friends who love three things: wine and Star Wars.
Welcome to Wine Wars. You're joining me as I sniff, sip, and talk about wine live from Madison, Wisconsin. I am your penultimate host, Scott, and it is another solo show, just you and I today. Everyone's schedule's again bonkers currently. Next episode, we should be able to get everyone together again behind the mics and have a lot to catch up on. Over the course of this show, we've usually seen Ann and Jason like every other weekend, and really we haven't seen them much since the new year, so it'll be nice to get behind the mics with all of them again soon, in particular because the new Solo movie is coming out in 16 days from when this drops. So very excited for that. But you and I today are going to pick up on a series of episodes that were started well over a year ago, but dropped and never followed up on. So here we go. This is talking about spring in the vineyard. If you go to an episode last year, we talked about what happens in the vineyard during winter, mainly pruning off the growth from the prior year. So spring now, we pick up and kind of see that it's a rather exciting time in the vineyard because winter's finally over, especially here in Wisconsin. 2 weeks ago it was snowing, and now 80-some degrees, and we're planting flower boxes on our windowsill, so that's very nice to have. Warm air open in the basement here at 9 o'clock at night. Very nice, very nice. So in the vineyard, things are picking up at a rapid pace. The most obvious sign of spring arriving is bud break. So what is that? Essentially, it's exactly what it sounds like. You have a Budweiser, you break it over someone's head. Bud break. There you go. No, that's not bud break. See, if we were here with everyone else, they'd all groan at that terrible joke, but here I am in silence, and you had to deal with it. So bud break, the new growth coming in for the year. This signifies that the spring season has begun. and essentially starts the new growth for the year based on the pruning methods that were used in the wintertime. So real quick recap on the pruning that's done in the winter. There are multiple different pruning methods that can be done. So I'll just be talking about one method that's used quite a lot called spur pruning. So a good visual on this, I kind of think a good comparison. So picture your body, everything from your neck down, that's going to be the trunk of the vine. The roots obviously being your feet, and the head of the vine right where your head is. And then extending out left and right, from there you have what are called cordons, C-O-R-D-O-N-S, plural, cordons. These become your arms. So you now have the body of the vine, 2 arms extending either way, and then growing from there you have the spurs. These spurs picture as your fingers. They grow up, hold your hand up, those are spurs. Then from the spurs, you have your buds. Think of those as your fingernails. Those are the new growth. That's what's coming in. Ever growing are those buds. So from the cordons, you'll have a handful of spurs, maybe 5 or so. From the spurs, you'll have buds, maybe 2 or 3. And this is all quite variable. Again, it depends on the pruning method that's being used. It depends on the grapes themselves, the varietal, the environment. So, for example, here in Wisconsin, quite often vines are trained up like at eye height, and I'm about 6 feet tall, so that's quite a ways up. The reason for that is to allow maximum airflow through the vines to help prevent spoilage, rot. You want to keep that humidity off the grapes, otherwise it's very problematic. Other areas throughout the world, you maybe will grow the vines closer to the ground. This is to help keep them cooler. If it's a less humid region, you would be doing that. Additionally, you want to take into account the age of the vine. Newer vines obviously grow more vigorously, so you want to prune those back a bit. Older vines are not going to be growing as much, so you want to cut back maybe less spurs, less buds, so that the nutrients and energy that the plant is producing is hitting those grapes at full capacity. Because that's really what managing a wine grape is all about. Having a grapevine is easy. You plant it in the ground and it grows like crazy. Just picture a grapevine in the wild. You'll see them overgrowing old buildings, other trees, because the vine itself doesn't really have a support structure. They grasp onto other material and grow up it. That's really what a grapevine is. But when you're growing grapes for wine, you want to cut back on all that. And that all starts with the pruning. It all starts with the choice of how many buds you want per spur, per cordon, blah, 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 blah. Very methodical thought goes into this from each vigneron, the people maintaining the vineyard. Again, all based on region, based on varietal, and the experience that they gain over the years. Okay, so we've pruned the vines in winter, and the buds are now breaking. So we kind of just sit back and let things roll, right? Not so much. Because we now have the buds popping up, there's a lot that we got to take care of. In addition to the buds breaking and coming through the vine where we want it to, you'll have what are called suckers and water sprouts popping up on the trunk of the vine itself. Take a walk outside your door and you'll see growth popping up like this on newer trees. So near the base of them, you have new offshoots growing. And this is not desirable when you're trying to grow grapes for wine. Reason for that is because, again, this is all growth that's going to be taking away the energy from the grapes themselves. And you don't want that. You want to maintain as maximum amount of energy going to the grapes as possible. So you remove the suckers, remove the water sprouts, keep that energy flowing to the grapes when they eventually come. Additionally, this is a very precarious time of year in the vineyard. You can have risk of frost, you can have risk of maybe hailstorms coming through, even just heavy rainstorms can damage the buds. So this is a very delicate time in the growing cycle of the vines. Here in Wisconsin, for example, back in 2016, right around this time of year, mid-May, we had a really bad cold snap come through and froze a large portion of buds and vines throughout the region. One of our most well-known wineries, Wollersheim, in particular, they had 75% of their red grapes were destroyed because of this frost, and 25% of the whites. So this is, very devastating. It can be very devastating for a winery or a vineyard if you have this risk. So lots of times you'll see vineyards have methods to combat this. One type of method is to have giant windmills essentially throughout the vineyard. So what they're doing is, if the temperature is dropping at night, they are blowing air through the vineyard, keep the cool air off the vines so that frost doesn't become an issue. Another method, and this is kind of more old world, is they'll have just fires throughout the vineyard. They can run gas lines out there, and then every 50 feet or so, whatever necessary, they'll have gas fires just running throughout the vineyard. And this is actually a very surreal image to see. If you Google image search this or Bing image search this, I don't even know if Bing image search, I would assume Bing image search is a thing. Search engine image of a vineyard with gas lights going through it, and it's really quite beautiful, quite interesting to see. So the vineyard owners are going to be doing anything they can to help combat that frost. When it comes to hailstorms, rainstorms, there's really only so much you can do there. So as spring progresses, you'll see the buds beginning to turn from just the leaves themselves, and you'll start to see flowers be produced. An interesting thing about grapevines is they're considered what's called a perfect flower. They are not dependent upon bees to pollinate them. So when all the bees finally collapse and die off, at least we'll still be able to drink wine and cry ourselves to sleep with, no other food to eat. But we'll have wine, so that's good. So because of that, you'll see lots of vigorous growth really set in pretty quickly in the vineyard. So from the buds, we got the flowers, and we'll have also what are called shoots and tendrils. The tendrils really are what climbs up on other trees or buildings, whatever structure can grab, to pull itself up towards the sun to maximize that amount of energy it's converting to feed the vine. The shoots and tendrils are, again, something that the vineyard workers have to manage because you'd only want so much of that. It's called canopy management, really, in the grand scheme of things. So you take a handful of those, and again, this is talking like the double cordon method that I talked about earlier. Remember, your body, your body's the trunk, your head, arms are the cordons, yada, yada. Once these shoots and tendrils grow through the buds, they will wrap some of them down onto the trellis. Again, this is if they're using a trellis system. Sometimes grapes, they just let grow more or less from the head and don't use a trellis system. But more often than not, there's a trellis system of some kind. So they take the shoots, take the tendrils, tie them to the trellis system, hold them in place so that when the grapes start to hang, they have the fruit in the right spot for maximum sunshine, maximum airflow, so on and so forth. And then they will prune back whatever they don't want. Again, this is to maximize the amount of energy getting to the grapes, but also to ensure that you're not, interfering with the next row over of grapes or the next vine itself in the same row. You don't want to interfere with the growth of that. They are all independent. If you have a chance to go to a vineyard, take a look at these things once you're further along in the growing season, and really you can see how they mapped out, how the wine growers mapped out the way they wanted these grapes to grow. And now with all of this pruning, after setting the shoots and the tendrils, getting everything in place, you're now in a pretty good position for summer to move in and really progress along with that fruit actually starting to come in on the vine itself. But there's plenty of other stuff that you can do in the vineyard. And don't worry, you're not done. Plenty of other work to do, always work to do. Don't even think about the cellar. Someone else is running that. You're in charge of the vines. Something else to do in spring, plant new vines. Whether some vines got destroyed because of a cold snap last year, or because they're just too old and they're not producing, or maybe you're expanding. Or maybe, hey, you're thinking about planting vines for the first time. You got a little plot of land on your home, and you know, gets good sunshine. Spring is when you want to plant those vines. But there's something a little bit different about newly planted vines in how you treat them than you do established vines. So for established vines, typically you don't really want to water them a whole lot. Reason for this is you would ideally have the roots grow down deep into the soil through all of the clay or sand or rocks, whatever soil it's in. You want it to go deep, deep into the ground so that the system is passing through all those different soil types to collect the nutrients that it needs to grow. And if it goes deep enough, it's going to hit water at some point. And the reason you want it to go through all that soil is the more it goes through, the more complexity you're going to get in the grape itself, in the flavor of the grape, because it's going through all those different soil types, picking up all those different nutrients, feeding to the grapes, and then ultimately feeding into the quality of the wine that you have. So with new vines, though, if you're planting them new this year, new this spring, you're going to water it quite a bit more than you would established vines. The reason for this is because you want those roots, you want the vine to survive its first year. You don't want it to die off. You don't want to have to replant it. And that first year's worth of growth is what's going to become the trunk of the vine once all things are said and done. So the first year's growth, just grows, standing up. It's building that body up to your chest. And then again, the next year's growth, year 2, that's going to be your arms. That's your cordons. And then the third year, you got your hands, fingers, and nails growing. And the third year is when you actually will be able to harvest grapes from the vine and see how they're going to do in production. So if you are thinking about investing in vines, this isn't something you're going to put in the ground over the weekend, and then at the end of this fall, hey, I'm making wine, or you got table grapes or whatever. This is an investment. You're going to be having to spend a good amount of time in the vineyard managing these, making sure that they are on track, because this is all about the future. Wine in particular is all about the future. It's said that I believe it's a saying in France that the wine that we make is not for us to drink, it's for our children, or it's for the next generation to drink. And there's something about that I personally really love, that it's about, hey, delayed gratification here, In today's society, everything's instant. Boom, I'm on my phone and I can figure out damn near anything if I Bing it or Google it. But with wine, you gotta be patient. Take the time, invest the energy or money, and then pay someone else to invest the energy and time. But that's something that's really great about wine that I really love. So if you're thinking about doing this, be sure that you want to invest minimum 3 years of your time, because after you get that first harvest, you then have another minimum 6 months, maybe 2 years, to figure out if you made the wine right. So this is a 5-year investment, but it's worth it. It's the reward is great if you're in there harvesting your own grapes, or, I don't have a vineyard myself, but even just harvesting grapes from the vineyard in town, and, 6 months later, having friends come back that helped me harvest grapes and say, hey, here's the wine that we harvested from last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Time goes by quicker than you think. So if you're thinking about doing it, invest, have fun with it, do it. Let me know how it goes too. I'm really interested to see how that goes for you. Okay, so we got our new growth in the ground, new vines in the ground, everything's pruned, everything's set. Summer will be coming in about 3 months, and, you never know what that's going to be like. To quote a small green puppet, always in motion is the future. Always in motion is the future. Again, if the rest of the gang was here, they would insult me and my Yoda impression, but you're now set up for summer in the vineyard, which will be our next segment when I come back in about 3 months, 2-3 months. We'll figure out what's happening in the vineyard in the summertime. It's getting hot. Fruit is setting. Veraison is happening. Veraison, that's a good word. V-E-R-S-A-I-O-N. Veraison. I spelled that wrong. V-E-R-S-V-E-R-A-S-I-O-N. There we go. I never got hooked on phonics. Veraison is when the grapes themselves start to turn to the final color that they will become. So Lots of purples, blues, or oranges, greens are mixed in on the same clump. Beautiful. But we'll talk about that in summer. So that means today's episode is wrapping up. I want to thank you all for listening. Again, in the next episode, should have everyone behind the mics, which will be great. Although I am enjoying these kind of one-on-ones, well, one on however many of you there are, listening and focusing a little more on the nerdy side of the wine, which I do enjoy from time to time. So that being said, if you do enjoy the show, either full group or me rambling alone in my basement about grapes, please rate and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify doesn't have a review, but we're on Spotify. And more than anything, just spread the word with your friends. If you have friends who are into wine and Star Wars, hey, you got great friends. Keep them. But tell them about the show. Say, hey, discovered this weird show where this guy just sits in his basement and talks about wine and Star Wars. I thought I was the only one who did that. Nope, some guy actually does that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for telling a friend. Thank you for supporting us via our sponsors. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that fun stuff. Instagram's been a bit more active. Amy and I did our trip to California, so lots of fun stuff on there. All right, that's it for this week's episode of Wine Wars. Thank you all again so much for listening. And until next time, please remember, it's just grape juice.
1, 2, 3, 4. Wine Wars.